Welcome to Solutions with Courtney Anderson. I am your host, Courtney Anderson. Thank you for joining me. As always, you can go to CourtneyAnderson.com for additional information. So here we are, and we have an interesting topic. First of all, we are in our Myth Warriors series. And of course, our Myth Warriors series is where we are warriors. You and I, we've donned our battle protective gear. We have our offensive weapons, and we are getting out into the world, and we are going to find out exactly what we're dealing with. We are warriors. We are fighters. We are engaged. We are fired up. And what are we fighting? We're fighting to determine whether or not concepts, ideas that are in our society or even in our own heads, are these accurate and credible concepts that we should believe in? Or are these falsehoods, tricks, deception, fallacies? Are these myths? So what we're out and we're geared up for battle. We are warring to find out, is this a myth? Is it reality? If something is a myth, then we're going to want to re-examine whether or not that is an effective method for us to integrate into our perceptions and decision-making process in terms of what our outcomes are going to be. So this is actually a two-part Myth Warriors episode, and the topic is, I am scared. My fear is holding me back in life. I am scared. My fear is holding me back in life. So that's what we're going to try to battle. That's the concept that we are going to get out there and, as warriors, try to determine, is this a myth? Is it a credible piece of content or data or information for us to utilize? And let's begin. So our topic, of course, is I am scared. My fear is holding me back in life. Let's start breaking it down. Fear. Fear is, of course, one of the key concepts in this topic, and the idea, the assertion, is that this thing called fear is holding me back in life. And so when we begin to break this down and we look at the idea of fear, I just pulled a dictionary definition. And I used the Oxford University Dictionary, and what I found was fear is an unpleasant emotion caused by the belief that someone or something is dangerous, likely to cause pain, or a threat. And of course, this is in the show notes, and it's, again, just a dictionary definition. It's one of the best places to start when we start a process in life of trying to analyze a concept or determine if we're utilizing the best process to make a decision. So we just often start looking to see, what does this word mean? What's the consensus, at least from a credible dictionary, on what this word or term or concept means? And so this is telling us that fear is an unpleasant emotion. Okay, that seems kind of reasonable. Most of us would associate fear with something not pleasant, something negative or unpleasant. It's unpleasant. It's an emotion. Okay, so it's not a food. It's not an animal. It itself is an emotion. Now, we may feel this emotion in reaction to a fear of a food or an animal, but the essence of this thing called fear, this thing that allegedly is holding us back in life, is an unpleasant emotion. It's just a feeling. An emotion is just a feeling, right? So it's not like literally physically some sort of wall. It's not that there's the Great Wall of wherever we live in the world that's holding us back. It's not a moat. It's not some sort of a body of water that's too treacherous for us to pass. It's literally this thing. It's an emotion. It's just a feeling. Wow. So part of this concept, as we begin to determine, is this a myth? Is it a credible concept? Part of it is this idea that we're supposed to believe, if we accept that this is not a myth, that this is a credible, accurate, what we'll just call truth, right? We're supposed to believe that this imaginary thing, it's an emotion, it's a feeling. So by imaginary, I mean I can't touch it. I can't taste it. It's an emotion, it's a feeling. So I'm supposed to believe that this feeling is in some way hindering me, holding me back, stopping me from whatever it is in life that I want to accomplish. That's a powerful concept. And of course, one of the foundational concepts of everything that we do in this consulting practice and corporate education programs is all about surpassing our goals. How can we help you surpass your goals? What's holding you back from surpassing your goals? And so, and often, many occasions, we're focusing on very measurable, tangible things. So maybe someone will say, well, I didn't complete my primary or secondary education. Okay, well, that's something that we can look at. We can go and go through the steps in the process, and wherever you live in the world, we can obtain that educational credential, and that then would stop holding you back. But what about this idea that a feeling, it's just a feeling, is holding us back in life? I don't know. It sounds a little bit to me difficult to just immediately accept on face value that this is not a myth, that I'm supposed to believe that some emotion is the thing that's holding me back in life from presumably moving forward or moving ahead or accomplishing whatever it is that are my goals. So I don't know. I'm curious at this point as we begin with just an examination of the concept of fear, which is allegedly some sort of emotion, and this emotion is caused by a belief that someone or something is dangerous or likely to cause pain or a threat. So let's continue to sort of break this down. All right, so it's some sort of emotion or feeling. Okay, well, I'll take that at face value. It's caused by a belief. Now, where do our beliefs come from? That's the next part, right? So, well, I think generically there's an understanding that our beliefs come from our own internal dialogue and thought process. The beliefs are that's where we're perceiving them. I'm thinking this. It's my belief. Now, larger than that, well, where do the ideas that are in our head, right? If it's in my head, this thing, this belief, where did it come from? Did I create it? Am I the first person in the history of the entire existence of humans that's thought this thing? Okay, well, if that was true, then it would probably not be in the dictionary because you would be the only one who had this belief, right? It's probably a little bit more universal. So where do we get the things in our head? Well, typically we get them from our environment, which may physically be our environment. So this idea is that there's some sort of belief in my head that someone or something is dangerous or likely to cause pain or a threat. Okay, well, if I live in a physical environment where there are large animals that will physically attack and perhaps kill humans, and I live in an area where there's not a lot of buildings or protection from these other animals, then it might make sense that my environment and other people in my environment, in my community, in my culture have shared with me, hey, you might want to be frightened of the tiger. You might want to be frightened of other large animals or even small animals that may have the ability to injure or harm or even kill a human. And so I think as humans, when you sort of look back in our historical narratives, even fables, you see so much is talking about sort of these natural predators, we would think, right? Other animals. And that's because that's what people at the time, before you had, sort of the physical structures we have now, and you sort of set up these elaborately constructed habitats that we live in, right? Where we do a lot to engineer, physical space and buffers and things of this nature so that we humans are amongst other humans and other animals that we typically deem less of a threat. It's a fascinating thing that we've done, over time. And it makes sense then that the belief in a culture, in a community, in a group where you're just literally more at risk, that it's more accessible for some predator, some other animal to attack you, that you had so many fables and stories about it, and that makes sense. So I'm trying to understand where these beliefs, things in my head, come from that tell me something or someone is dangerous or likely to cause pain or threat. Where is it coming from? Well, again, it comes from our environment. It may again come from our physical environment, but it also is often going to come from our cultural norms and expectations. It also will come from our cultural beliefs and foundations. So when you look again historically at different human societies, if there were certain beliefs or spiritual beliefs, then many times the people would build their lives around these beliefs. And if people were frightened of something, then it made sense that they would share that with other younger children in their community, and they would talk about it. And even something as simple as the elements, right? So we think about this in modern times, right? You think, okay, fire. All right, and again, there's a lot of historical narratives and fables and stories about fire, right? And some people might think, well, who's really fearful of fire in modern times? Well, we all are, I would argue, because we have fire departments, right? And we have people who literally they're trained, and their primary job in the role is to respond if there's a fire. Because for all of the things that we've accomplished and all of the technology and the amazing advances we've made, fire is still a frightening thing to us, because we may be safe in our structure, but fire, especially one that becomes a large fire out of control, we literally in modern times still have people whose trained special job is just to come and respond to a fire and try to rescue people that are on site of the fire, and have the training and the tools and the gear so that they can come into this fire environment and then fight the fire. And I have constantly appreciative of those people who serve. So my argument is that a fear, right? Fear is this belief, right? It's this emotion caused by a belief. So my emotion is, something's dangerous about to happen. And I might have a belief that fire might be something dangerous. That's something, when we look back again, that prior human societies were fearful of, but it's something that we're fearful of now. We're fearful of in modern times, because we can do a lot to combat a fire. We can do a lot to prevent a fire with materials that we use in buildings and things of that nature, but we're still susceptible to it. Fire, right now, is still a dangerous situation, because by ourselves, without any protective gear, without any ability to escape it, a fire will begin to prevent us to breathe in enough oxygen to sustain us. So a lot of times people die of what they call smoke inhalation. So it's not even that the flames got to you, but you just couldn't breathe. We need oxygen. And so even though people in prior times might not have fully understood that, part of that is the danger, they understood the consequences of what happened to people who were around fire or when fire got out of control. So a lot of this is not for me to tell people have a fear of fire, but my argument is simply that when we try to figure out if there's something that we could have that's a feeling that's based on something that's in our head, it might have originally had a credible, accurate reason. So if we had a show topic, fire is dangerous, and we were asking ourselves in the Myth Warriors series, is that something that's a myth, or is that something that's credible? I would argue that's credible. Fire that's uncontained, that spreads, that we have no way to escape or to address, is dangerous. I don't think that's debatable in modern times even. So you can see that in some instances there may be a fear of a specific issue that's reasonable. And it's sort of like, you tell people when, with young kids, and you teach, you try to teach people, young people, don't put your hand on a hot stove, right? You may not have fire or flame, potentially, if it's electric, but you're going to get burned. It's going to hurt. And so many of the things that we think, I'm scared. My fear is holding me back in life. Depending on what it is, there may be a credible argument that if the show topic was, I am scared of fire, my fear of a fire is holding me back in life from being around uncontrolled fires, that's a long show topic, but it might be accurate. Our point is, fear is an emotion. You and I are not the first people to ever feel it. That's why it's in the dictionary. It's based on a belief we have that someone or something could be dangerous. Some of the things that we believe could be dangerous or likely to cause pain or a threat, there's a credible reason why we believe this, and under the circumstances of I'm not going to run into an area where I see and smell and observe an uncontrolled fire, then it would make sense to say, I'm standing here, I'm scared of that fire. My fear is holding me back in life from running into that building or location where that uncontrolled fire is currently raging. That is a credible, I would argue, valid concept for us to integrate into our lives for our own safety. Again, the issue, though, is that specific fear of that specific instance that currently exists right over there is the raging fire. I see it. I smell it. Oh, my goodness. I am scared of that. My fear is holding me back in life from running into that building right now with no protective gear and nothing to permit me to be able to breathe or fight it. Okay, then in that instance, yes. In that instance, our fear is. Our fear is not a myth at that instance, because we have a very specific fear to a very specific current event. And yes, at that moment, my fear is holding me back from entering into that burning building, as I have no ability to continue to live as soon as I'm deprived of enough oxygen. And then, of course, the aftermath of that, if I'm unable to remove myself for the fire to be extinguished, is beyond the fact that I'm dead, my remains would also be burned. So this then, if that long topic was the show topic, would be easy. We have answered it. That is a reasonable, credible determination based on something that is not a myth. Here's where the challenge is. Many of the times in life when we have our specific show topic as it's written, which is, I am scared. My fear is holding me back in life. So this is not I'm scared of a specific thing. And this is not I'm scared of a specific thing that is happening at this exact moment. This is a generic, I'm just scared in general, and my fear of generic things in general is holding me back. And there is a huge difference between I'm scared in general and I'm scared of a building that's on fire that's right next to me right now that I'm not going to run into. There is a huge difference in my analysis. Let's discuss why. So this whole idea is that your fear is this emotion. The emotion is based on a belief that there's someone or something that's going to potentially be dangerous, cause you pain, or some kind of threat. All right, makes sense. And now as we look at the difference between a concrete, currently existing event that has a credible reason why at the time that this current event is occurring, or this current person is in your presence, that it makes sense then that you would, quote, be held back from either running into the building or making another choice. Let's talk about, though, this broader, wider, more generic, and more pervasive fear. So the idea is here that, of course, we think we have some options. I've done other shows, and we just talk about this constantly because we spend a lot of time about, addressing what's holding you back from surpassing your fears. And in this series and then other series, we talk about all these different substantive areas of either law or management or human resources or education or whatever. And we spend a lot of time on that. And the whole sort of underpinning of that is that you have a choice. There's no point in sitting around talking about all these different concepts and issues if there's nothing that you can do to change the outcome. Then it would be, I guess, mildly interesting if you just thought this type of information was just fun to learn for no reason, but there would be no purpose to it because you couldn't do anything with it. So the assumption is that we have some ability, some concept of free will that I can do something with, determining whether or not this is a myth or an accurate statement. I'm going to argue for the purpose of this discussion that we're going to come from the perspective of you do have some amount of free will. Because if obviously you don't, then it doesn't even matter whether you're held back or not, because nothing that you experience has a relationship to your decisions or your desires. It's all just determined for you. So assuming that I have the ability to do something in my life to impact in some manner outcomes, we asked earlier, are you the first one in the world that's ever had this emotion based on this belief that something could be dangerous or a threat or painful? No, that's why it's in the dictionary. So if not everyone, the majority of people have experienced some sort of fear. Now, there's interesting psychological data about some small populations of humans who really don't feel any fear, and usually it's a negative ramification. We just talked about, if you don't even have the ability to understand, that building's on fire, but it doesn't bother me at all. I'm curious to see what's going on in there. You just sort of run in there. Well, it's very high risk that you're going to be, injured or potentially killed. And there are people that just have no ability to understand some of these really basic, specific issues in life, and to react in a way that gives them the safety of understanding that there is a literal, currently existing threat to your safety, or that's dangerous or may cause you pain. So there's a tiny percentage of people who don't have the ability to do that. Some people physically cannot feel pain. That's just a totally different thing. And they're, they put their hand on a hot stove and they don't feel any, how hot it is. It doesn't travel through their neurons to kind of give them the physical sensation of something. That's one type. And then other people will have a psychological or emotional, mostly psychological component where they don't understand the consequences. But we're leaving those little tiny subpopulations alone. We are focused on sort of the broad average us. And so in our broad average us, most of us, if not all of us, have some sort of experience with feeling fear, right? We've all been those of us in this sort of generic average who can feel pain, feel a burning stove, emotionally understand that, this is a threat, this is painful. So those of us in that group, we've been scared and frightened, all of us. I'm scared all the time. In fact, it was interesting. I went to a dinner party not that long ago, and it was just maybe one or two people that I knew, and it was one of those things where everybody else I didn't know. So it was interesting, one of those opportunity to meet new people. And so the hostess of the dinner party, as we were sitting down to eat the main course, it was a small dinner party, and she said, well, since, there's so many different new people, everybody would sort of go around and talk about, I think she said the best moment in your life or the biggest accomplishment, that you want to share. And so people shared about their, children's accomplishments or their grandchildren or raising a healthy family. People shared about their work, things of that nature. But what I talked about is I just said that my biggest accomplishment or biggest moment of success in life has been being frightened and still doing whatever it is I'm frightened of. And I meant that because generically, that's the thing that I'm most proud of. I am frightened of all types of things. And I make decisions, trying to look at all of the different outcomes that I'm aware of and sort of see what would potentially give me the best possible outcome. And I still do things that I'm petrified of doing it while I'm agreeing to do it. It's like standing at the edge of a really deep, diving, you're at the diving board and it's like a deep, body of water, a big, deep, diving pool. And so it's a safe distance and it's a safe, place for you to dive, but you're still scared to jump. I'm scared. And the things that have impressed me about myself, it sounds boastful, it's not meant to be, but some of the things that I take pride in accomplishment is that even when I am scared, I still jump. I don't jump recklessly. But if I've gone through, is that height safe? Okay. Is the water safe? Yes. Have you been trained in this? Yes. Is there more likely than not the possibility of a good outcome, as I've defined it versus a bad one? Yes. And then I don't let the fear stop me from just trying. I just go. So if I'm going to move to a new, city or a new state or a new country by myself, I just do it, even though I don't know anybody and I'm scared to death. I don't know anybody. I have to learn this new place, and I have to secure a place to live, and I've got to figure out everything from, where's my local store to how do I find a vet to take care of my dog to am I ever going to feel comfortable and how's the weather going to be and just everything. I'm scared all the time. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten ready to get on a plane to go somewhere that's, either that I've never been or that I haven't been in a long time, especially places that are really far away. So I'm getting ready to get on a 15-hour plane ride. A, it's a long plane ride. And B, especially if I've never been where I'm going and if I'm going there for some, big, work event that I've never done, all that's scary. The big flight's scary, going to a place I've never been, especially if there's a fear on my part that I'll fail and mess up or that I won't be able to be successful in navigating my way around. Oftentimes, there are language issues where I don't know either any of the language or I just know a little bit of it. I still go. Sometimes I'll talk to myself, in a waiting area at an airport, and I just say to in my head, you can do this. Just go. And I think one of the things that's helped me is I always think to myself, okay, assuming that there's not like, the worst possible outcome, that you cease to exist as that I'm die or I'm in some sort of horrible accident. Assuming that, then even if it's a disaster, I can always sort of come back to the status quo, right? So if you're going to move somewhere by yourself and you're frightened to death and you're not really sure what to do, well, if it's a horrible disaster, then you can always come back to where you are now. It's sort of like the swimming analogy, right? So I gave the diving example. You're standing there and you just dive anyway. It's sort of like this. If I'm standing in a swimming pool, you can tell I love swimming. Actually, I really do. I've talked about it in other programs. I think it's just absolutely fun and it's great exercise. So, you're holding on the edge of the pool and you think, oh, I'm scared to let go of the wall because I'm holding on to the wall and it's safe, right? Like, I'm not fearful at all right now because I'm holding on to the wall. I'm not even out in the water. Potentially anything could happen in the water, but now I'm in the water, but I'm literally gripping, the side of this physical, pool. But I always think, okay, just let go. So if you let go and you float out in the middle, away from the wall, now you're not holding on to the wall, it's more scary, then you can just turn around and just go back to the wall. And I'll tell you, one of the things that when I was younger, and I still don't know how to do it, roller skating. So roller skating is something I never learned how to do. I'm not athletic. I've shared this in many programs. I have a very poor sense of balance, all this type of problem. So anyway, but as a young person, roller skating was popular, it still is popular, and many young people would have birthday parties at events at the roller rink. Okay, great. So I would go. I know that I'm, not talented at this. And it's the same thing. If I went and kind of held on to the side of the wall in the roller rink, even though I'm less scared, I'm not going to fall, or I'll fall slower if I do, I'm already on the wall holding it or gripping it, I would just let go. And go out there not holding on to anything. Now, is it scary? Yeah. But if it's too scary, I can just go back to the wall. And it's the same thing in life. I never understand when I talk to people who tell me that they believe. So they think that absolutely positively it is not a myth. And they'll say to me, I'm scared. My fear is holding me back in life. And they'll talk to me specifically about what that means. Applying for a new job, leaving an abusive situation, going back to school or some sort of program, a certification to obtain a new skill, moving, anything. And they'll just say to me, look, I'm scared, so I'm not going to do it. Which to me doesn't make any sense. Everyone's scared of things all the time. You don't even have a specific thing right now that you're scared of and a reason why that's credible that you're scared. So if you move somewhere and you hate it, just move back to where you came from. If you, and go and you like, oh, I'm going to try a new business or get a new certification or skill and I'm going to see if and see how that goes. If you go get that new certification skill and you go out and try it and you don't like it, go back to the other one. And, in personal relationships, people do this all the time, right? I'm going to leave. Okay, leave. And then if you leave and you don't like that you've left and you want to go back, people all the time go back. I don't understand why people act like there's no ability to, when you're in a new situation, make a different decision. So if you think you want to go to this new place, whether it's a workplace, a living place, a social, place, and you get there and you don't like it, you can just leave again. And to argue that fear is what has held you back is difficult for me to understand. Fear of what? Seriously. And the idea, I guess, is that something bad could happen. Well, something bad could happen anywhere. You could stay exactly where you are in your whole life. And there are people, they read these narratives, and there's great statistics also on the percentage of people in a certain town or part of the world who are born, live, and die and never leave, like a 60-mile area or smaller. Like they just lived their whole life in that one little area. Some people have so much fear that they barely will leave, their own little place where they live, right? Because of all the, what could happen. There could be something out there that's bad. Well, sure, there could be, of course. That doesn't make any logical sense for me to say that there's no threats. Of course there's threats. But the issue that we're exploring as we go into in part 2 of this is how credible are those threats? How reasonable, when you look at the balance of your possible outcomes, is the choice to literally do nothing and just be paralyzed by fear? And again, in part 2, which I strongly encourage you to join me, we're going to delve into some of these really specific issues, and I have some quotes that I want to share about fear and give some better examples about your choices. So your options are, yes, I give in to fear and I just don't do anything. And I'm just right here, right now. I don't want to move or breathe or do anything different because I'm fearful. The challenge is the more you do that, typically the more fears you have, and your world gets smaller and smaller and smaller because you're fearful all the time. I don't want to go to that place, never been there, something bad could happen. I don't want to eat that food, I've never had it, something bad could happen. I don't want to talk to that person, I don't know them, something bad could happen. I don't want to ask for a promotion or to move to a different department because I'm scared, I don't know those people, something bad could happen. I mean, you can take this concept and apply it literally everywhere, and then you do nothing. So whether or not the doing nothing and no change and no growth and no opportunity for anything other than what you currently have is the right thing for you in terms of surpassing your goals is something that we need to delve into, again, in part 2. But even here in part 1, I would just ask you, if you right now have such a high level of contentment, you've surpassed all of your goals, literally you honestly think to yourself, I'm living the dream. This is it. This is it. I wouldn't change anything about, my work, my social life, my relationships, who I am, my health, anything. I said this is really it. Then I would argue that, okay, your fear is not holding you back because you have exactly everything you could have ever wished for and more. If you're not in that situation, come on and join me in part 2. So thank you for joining me here in part 1. As always, you can come to CourtneyAnderson.com for more information. Thanks.